Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as always by Mr. Tucker Hazel, and today we are here to do a video that nobody else in the Nintendo community has done. That is a video predicting the Nintendo Switch 2 presentation next week. As of time recording this on Saturday, where it's surreal, we're only 4 days away.
Yeah.
So we got to
No,
post
it's
this
quite
soon.
real, actually.
We got to post this really soon.
Yeah.
But obviously, everybody's doing this, and if all your friends jump off the bridge, you do too. So we're here today
Absolutely.
to chat about what we're looking forward to, but we're going to be pragmatic, right? I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I predict we're going to get Star Fox, and I predict we're going to get F-Zero, whatever. We're going to try to be real accurate here, and in my view, there's like a particular way this show is going to play out. But
And I think you do actually have a pretty unique
I think so.
look into what you expect from this.
Yeah, and so before we dive into that, we're going to try to think about, okay, what's the actual show going to be like? What are we going to learn about the hardware? And then obviously what games are going to get revealed. But before we do that,
Yeah.
Tucker, I think this is sort of, I hit the mic, apologies audience. I think that this is like the most obvious, I know what you're going to say, thing in the world, but how do you feel about the Switch 2 Direct next week?
Uh, I have been feeling very laissez-faire about the whole ordeal for the last few weeks since the Switch 2 was announced and they gave us that date for the Switch 2 Direct. I've been like, we've waited so long and it has been quiet for so long that what's a few weeks?
Right.
Whatever, we'll get it. And I feel like the community sentiment has been quite muted about this, of like, it's coming, but like, we've kind of run out of talking points at a certain point, which is why I think our video might be, our discussion might be a little bit different from other people, because we do actually have a little bit of a different thought process on what the show might actually be like. But it wasn't until we started getting rumors of the Switch 1 Direct before, and then I had a chance to sit down and talk to particularly Dan and Bo on a stream about what we thought was going to be in both Directs, where I was like, oh my god, it's happening.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Nintendo's going to start talking to us. They're going to reveal games, and not only just like, oh, a game or two, like presumably a really good chunk of high-profile games, and potentially new IP, and like, it hit me that like, the era is finally upon us. The weight and cloud of Switch 2 has been hanging over my head for like 18 months. And so I just kind of got used to it being there, but it's like, finally, the clouds are parting. We're going to be able to see into the heavens. And then, of course, in a couple days after that, you and I are going to be playing Switch 2,
Yep.
which gives it even more of an exciting tenor of the quickest turnaround you can possibly expect from learning about a game's existence to being one of the first people in the world to play it. It's going to be something that we remember for the rest of our lives. Especially the hands-on preview, but the Direct as well. I mean, it's just a really exciting transitional moment that Nintendo's really been hyping up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this idea of it finally feeling real is very, very valid. I'm so excited, but I also think that there's a degree to which we need to temper expectations around this show as well. Because I think we might have a little bit of a different outlook on how the community is feeling. I think that the community has been waiting so long and wants this so bad that I think expectations are so high.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not that I feel like Nintendo's going to under-deliver in this show.
I feel like, what's the thing when you take drugs and they just stop working as good anymore, right?
Is there a term for that?
Yeah, of course there is, but I'm not a fucking doctor. But
Yeah.
it's that
or a
thing
meth user.
for direct hype, but where people have just been
Sure.
hyped for so long at max capacity that I feel like people are a little bit burnt out on it.
Yeah.
But what were you saying?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
what
I
I'm
just
doing
think
with
that
drugs.
realistically, Nintendo is going to do a lot of foundational work here, and I think we have to be ready for that. Something that has been getting me so excited over the last couple of days, beyond just, as we've been saying amongst each other recently, like, I was 16 when the Switch came out. I'm 24 now, right? So Switch has been so important for so long in my life, for such a critical point in my life, that it's very cool to think, okay, what's this Switch 2 era going to encapsulate? And parallel to that, with this now Nintendo Today app and this promise of news in the midterm between the Direct and then the actual release, it seems like we're just gonna go from 18 months of like no or weird or spotty communication
Yeah.
into daily hits of excitement, and we're gonna, the outlook on Nintendo is going to be so radically different. I think just in really, if rumors and leaks are to be believed, in about 2 months. So
Yeah.
I think that's really exciting. But Tucker, I want to move into our view of the overall show now, because my take, you were saying I have a slightly different take, is that I really think that we should go in not expecting Nintendo to have wall to wall announcements in this
Yeah.
show.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is because Nintendo is not just thinking about this as an opportunity to finally show the hardcore community that's been following these leaks in the trenches
Yeah.
for
Yeah. Of
a year
course.
and a half, brand new games. They just broke a viewership record with the Direct for Switch One a couple days ago,
Which is silly,
which is silly.
by the way. I mean, obviously is a sign of hunger
Yeah,
for
pent up demand.
information. Because it's not that direct in particular that got people excited.
No.
They were watching it because it was a direct, not necessarily because of what was in it.
Yeah, and that's illustrative of the fact that there's going to be such a broad um, viewer base here that
Yeah.
Nintendo has
This will
to.
easily be their most viewed presentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have to set the table. They have to explain to people who maybe never even played a Switch 1 before how you put the system in the dock, how you take it out,
Mm-hmm.
how you attach the Joy-Con, what
Yeah.
tabletop mode is. They're going to be doing all of this stuff and talking about new features of the system and showing off this mouse mode, doing all these things. And so I don't think we should be anticipating 5 big game announcements.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think we're just looking at a couple. I think that this is going to be a show covering the launch window, and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
circle back around in June or later in the year to actually fill
Mm-hmm.
out the calendar through the holiday. That's my view. I just
Yeah.
think that we shouldn't expect game, 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 game. I think you should
Yeah. Of
expect like
course.
20 minutes of just really fundamental facts about the hardware. You also
Yeah.
think about them sharing what the Pro Controller looks like. If they want to talk about price, if they want to talk about release date, right?
I think they do.
I think they definitely want to talk about release date. The rumor is that the pre-orders aren't going up right away, so I don't think
Yeah.
it's impossible that they don't talk about the price, especially if the
No,
price
no,
is
they
high,
will.
and then they
No,
want
they
to
will.
punt that over to Nintendo today. But the point is, my view of the show is it's not just going to be a wall-to-wall game blowout.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that general sentiment. Though, of course, we stipulate 20 minutes or so. That might be a little bit high, but a chunk at the beginning at least.
Yeah,
That is more about the hardware itself. I think is good and important to have. Though it also means that if we can, I think, quite fairly assume that this is probably around an hour long
that's my view.
presentation.
Yeah,
I think that's not ridiculous. That still means 45 minutes of game reveals, because I am of the opinion that very little is going to be old here. I don't think we're going to be covering trailers for previously announced games. Maybe Metroid Prime 4. That's the only one I can really see. I think that they're not going to do any ports or remasters here. I think this is going to be totally forward looking, and I'm really excited for that. And that means that we have ostensibly an entire normal direct's worth of game announcements. And if you recall back to January 2017, that was actually also barely over an hour long. So we're probably looking at about the same amount of show scope here. And they
yeah,
also had that opening section. And then they, of course, followed it up with maybe the most amount of first party games Nintendo's ever announced in one showcase. And so, in terms of direct length, I don't think that will be what holds back number of titles. But I am interested in your thoughts on why Nintendo would put a lot of like granular effort at the beginning into explaining basic Nintendo Switch elements and in hardware features, because I think it'll be a little bit more snappy, where when they're talking about tabletop mode, what it's going to be is an explanation of tabletop mode, but mostly a very quick explanation on how the Switch 2 is an improvement over the Switch 1 in terms of the flexibility of it. Well, I guess we saw the
we saw the
tabletop
U-shaped
stand.
kickstand and the
Yeah,
January thing. Yeah,
it seems to really be no different than the Switch OLED one, but of course I do think they'll want to highlight that and highlight how far it can go down. But I think that'll just be like a 3D animation thing, like what they kind of had. Like, look how far it can go down.
yeah.
And with a Joy-Con, it's not going to be you can attach a Joy-Con. It's now they're magnetic, and so I don't think that's going to be as or docking. Like, I don't know if the dock is going to be any different, or if there's going to be any features that like kind of show up at the top of the Switch when it's in the dock. But I think it's gonna be much more focused on what the differences are, because even though you're right, Nintendo might be angling this towards people who haven't touched the Switch before. I think that's unlikely because they've really hit the soft cap on how many people are going to want
Yeah.
any system, period. And so that would be a really small number of people and I think it would kind of bog down the audience that this direct is actually for, who they're advertising it to, is the people who are hungry for that information. So I don't think it's necessary for them to do what well, I guess mostly Nintendo does with their initial hardware reveals, is really step-by-step sort of baby's first look into a system, because this is one of their first totally iterative systems. Most of the things that we know about it, or that are going to be interesting about it, are things that were present on the Switch 1, and that has become such ubiquitous sort of action vocabulary to where I don't think they need as deep a dive into the system hardware.
Sure. I mean, I don't disagree that they don't need it. I just don't. I guess I just disagree that they're not going to provide it.
Mm-hmm.
I just ultimately think that they want this to be the front to tail explanation of what the Switch 2 is and why you should buy it.
Yeah.
I also think that if you think about length, while I think it will be a little bit longer than a typical Direct, this is also an edited thing, whereas the January 17, 2017 presentation obviously wasn't. So they could get it down to 45 minutes,
Yeah.
And
With
let's
the
just say
same
it's,
amount of information. Yeah.
yeah, 45 minutes and 15 minutes of it is talking about hardware or something. Like, I just think my larger point is that I think that there is going to be a lot of just hardware talk. And I think that is even if it is just about stuff that's new, right? Even if it is about mousecon mode or these things that we only kind of know about, that's going to be there.
Yeah,
They want to explain how the gimmicks work. They want to.
We know about that, but we don't really know how
Right.
how it works. So that is definitely something to learn about.
Yeah, so I just think that ultimately we have to keep a broader view of what Nintendo's trying to accomplish here. And that's why I go back to this being perhaps their most viewed showcase yet. And the fact that, you see them constantly re-uploading trailers about Nintendo Switch Online and things, right? I think that
You're right. So they might do another NSO
Yeah.
explanation or something like that. Though I do think that in that case, again, I return to this being something where I think they know that 95% of people watching this don't need an explanation of how switches work. What they're
Sure.
looking for is what the changes are that we're not familiar with. But I think that the two actually can coexist, as I was
Yeah.
mentioning. I think each of these explanation sections will be more focused on what is different, with a sort of implied this is actually how it works.
That's
Something like
fair, yeah.
NSO, I think we'll get a 2-minute little animated segment of this is how it works. Here are the features, and then that will be included with something that would intrigue us because we know how NSO works,
Yeah.
which is maybe a new feature, maybe how voice chat will work, something that that parallels more closely. This is how Switch 2 is an improvement on Switch 1.
Sure.
Even if it is ostensibly, Nintendo Switch Online lets you play games. You also get access to this DLC and to each of these things, and here are the tiers very quickly. And now that we have been working on this for so long, here are the improvements that we are working on to make it a more accessible experience, a more popular experience for people to want to have as a part of their Switch experience.
Yeah, and I mean, this is also where this relationship between the show and Nintendo today becomes interesting because, there is a world where they say, okay, we just want the top line items in the Direct and everything else we can punt to the app. That's why I'm interested if something like the price will show up. I mean, you think about the show in January 2017. I don't think they said the price of the Joy-Con then.
They did, yeah.
They did?
Sorry. For the accessories. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the system. My bad. I spoke too soon. I should let you finish your sentences. It's a bad habit of mine.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I think that there's a potential that they start splitting out information, and I even think that the price of the console is not guaranteed to be there if they're not dropping pre-orders that day. I think about the fact that the price could be higher than we anticipate, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the
Yeah.
system is $500, I don't know if it's going to be. I still err on the side of $399.99.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's pushing much beyond $400, do you really want that to be a takeaway from the direct? That's that expensive. I'm just going to be
I don't know
interested.
if Nintendo cares. Like, I think that they are
Yeah,
so proud of what they do and bullish on its potential success that even something like that is a sting. I
yeah,
think they're like, no, we made hardware that's worth that. I don't think they want to hide that information because I think they're just too straight. I honestly think they're too straightforward, honest, and proud of
yeah.
like they're like, yeah, no, that's what it costs. You're gonna buy it. I mean, that's like the mental state I think they're having on that, even if it is super expensive.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm just curious what because if we're gonna have daily updates, as they
Yeah.
said,
Mm-hmm.
to what extent is that going to be like, oh, Pauline is playable in Mario Kart, the new Mario
Mm-hmm.
Kart, or is it going to be, okay, there's a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack in the Pro controller.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious what that information is going to entail ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think just sort of my top line view of the show is that it's going to be way more than just games, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that we got a taste of what that's going to feel like in
Yeah.
last week's show.
Well, yeah, I think you make a good point because we were not expecting the sort of extraneous segments that they
Yeah,
featured in the recent direct. Um, the interesting thing is, I also think that there's a way to read that direct that just happened as kind of the opposite of what you're implying. Is not that there won't be a big section that's not game stuff, but is that these are things they wanted to get into people's heads ahead of time, so they didn't
sure.
have to include them in this Switch 2 Direct. And so there will be less of that maybe than you're expecting
Well, I mean, I'm
because
not even
they already
talking.
showed us.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking just specifically about those features. I'm thinking
Yeah,
about,
no, of course.
for instance, what are they going to say about the UI? Are they going
Hmm.
to, take us through the home menu? Are they going to show if there's an achievement system? Are they going to show that? Are they going to show
Yeah,
a return of themes? Are they going to go into these sorts of things or not?
yeah,
I guess it's about, if you're thinking about this direct as how can we sell people on a Switch 2 in
hmm,
45 minutes or an hour? What are the things we have to hit to make the system understandable? And then what are the
yeah,
things we have to hit to make it look glossy and cool and
yeah,
fun and a necessary upgrade? And then what can we offload? And I guess I'm still sort of multiple minds about it, really. But
yeah.
I just temper expectations, at least in my own head, that this is going to
Sure.
be a banger show in amount of announcements. I think the last thing I'm curious about from your view about the overall
Yeah.
show to that end then is, do you think that this show is taking us from June to December in terms of games, or is it going to look at, as I kind of think it will, that first chunk of time post release?
Um. Well, it depends. The interesting thing about the timing of this direct is this is the latest early in the year direct we've had, which
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily preclude them from also having a summer showcase. I think that's very possible. But I do think that the major holiday game will be revealed. I think that's what they'll close on. And I think that's probably the 3D Mario game. And I think uh, that gives that game 6 months worth of marketing, which is totally reasonable. And I think another thing with new hardware and why I think I'm a little bit hesitant to commit to, as you're saying, this being very focused on launch window, is new hardware is also about promises. It's about
yeah,
why you want to get into this ecosystem and exist in it for long term. We're going to use that very lightly there because I'm saying long term is 6 months, where you're saying it's no, you're not saying it's 3 months, but like you're implying that they would focus on 3 months. I think getting that information out there of what at least one of the big games you're going to be playing late in the year, and I even think it's possible to get a tease of something that is coming next year for Switch 2, just to make sure that people know. Obviously, it's something they're committing to, but one of the things that I think worked so great about Switch and why I was such a diehard defender of that system is they were very open about, here is sort of a roadmap of what's going to happen. And even if those games got delayed, even if there was actually really some droughts in like 2018 and stuff, because we knew that they'd early announced Bayonetta 3 and Game Freak is working on a home console Pokemon game and Kirby and Yoshi, and these things are
yeah,
technically they were super far out. That definitely gave the console an air of robustness, even if it wasn't actually tangible. It was a sort of theoretical, robust library, which obviously ended up turning out. But even in the first 7 to 8 months of the system, where I was getting a lot of games, but we hadn't seen a lot of these games they announced, we were like, it's all coming. And that is what I think gave such a fervent fan base for Switch at launch. And to me is what pulls in a new consumer is the idea of commitment to a systems library and excitement for it in the midterm that I think would really be hampered for a prospective customer if they have no idea what's going to be happening outside of the first 3 months of the systems library.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, because obviously in 2017 we got basically everything.
Yeah,
we didn't get.
I don't think it'll be that big.
Yeah, June didn't have any announcements for that holiday, right? Or did they date
No.
Xenoblade for then?
Oh yes, but
Yeah,
they already said it was coming in 2017.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I'm
Technically Mario and Rabbids, but however you feel about that.
that's a good point. But that was at Ubisoft show, right?
Yeah, but it was also at Nintendo's show.
Sure, I was just trying to remember where it was announced. As a
Ubisoft,
sidebar.
yeah. But
yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I feel like there's a lack of clarity at this moment as to how Nintendo is feeling about the right time to announce a game.
yeah,
Obviously we just got a couple 2026 titles, and it certainly would be strange if there was Switch 1 titles on the calendar further out than there are Switch 2 titles.
yeah. But you think that's probably the case, right?
Yeah, because I just don't think, because we're getting the show on April 2nd.
Yeah.
Would they then wait until September for another direct?
I think a summer showcase is probably reasonable.
Yeah, and I just find myself wondering, if they even say that showcase is coming in the summer? Because we got the announcement of this one in the January show. I just ultimately, again, it comes back to time, right? It comes back to the duration of this show.
Mm-hmm.
If they're saying, okay, we're having this show here and the system's about to come out, Bo makes this point that is a really salient one of part of why Breath of the Wild worked as a launch title is because we had been knowing about it and learning about it for, at that point, years, right?
Yeah.
All of E3 2016, with the exception of the announcement of Mario Party Star Rush, was dedicated to showing off Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
We'd been building anticipation for that game since 2014. Now, we'll talk about the games in a second if we feel that Metroid Prime 4 fits into that slot in a manner of speaking. But if we're saying, okay, the console is probably out in about 2 months from this show, and then there is a need to get really deep into what Mario Kart offers and show that EPD4 game and play it a little bit or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I just wonder, is there really time? Maybe as you're saying, it really is mostly about that launch window. And then at the end of the show, they just drop a little teaser and say holiday 2025.
Mm-hmm. Because I think as soon as you drop one later in the year game or even a tease of a 2026 game, I think that allays any fears. I'm using that in real air quotes there. Any fears that I would have. And I think it would also just feel more balanced. And also we do know that Nintendo, in almost all of their directs, is pretty consistently good at short-term game, mid-term game, long-term game. Teasing something that will then be the opener for the next direct. And usually it's something that's even outside of the year that the direct is happening in. And so I don't really see why that would change here when I do think a roadmap is much more important for a new piece of hardware than it is for an old piece of hardware.
Yeah, I would maybe agree with that a little bit more if they had if they had an interest in having really a roadmap to this point. I mean, it's been so. It's obviously not haphazard. There's a deep amount of planning that goes into a rollout of a system like this. But I guess the most precise version of what I'm saying is I could see them saying, okay, here are launch games A and B. Here's a game you're going to play a little bit later into the summer. And then at the end, here's a tease of the holiday game. And then you get to June.
Sure. And
they fill in more of the fall.
Yeah.
Again, for me,
that's okay. You know what? Maybe we're on the exact same page then. Okay. I thought you thought they wouldn't even have a holiday game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they will. I guess we'll see. If we're having to play if we're having to really play a game here and I have to lock in a prediction of some kind, I think you're probably right. I just think that my general concern in this video is to not have the expectations all the way up here for what they're going to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I think that we're also already tempering expectations
Yeah.
by saying that, because I do think that there are people thinking this is going to be on the same level as the 2017 presentation, where it's really a full calendar's worth of games and things teasing into the future and
Yeah.
all of that. Where I don't think I think Nintendo is more controlled now. I think they have a better controlling of their messaging now. I think they understand the position they're in a lot better. Where in 2017 they really needed to do exactly what I was saying, is give that roadmap so people know they are full in on this, which of course they
Yeah.
were.
I mean, because that's another key difference I think we have to appreciate is that Nintendo is in a much more dire position in January
Yeah, of course.
2017,
Yeah.
financially, in terms of their perception, still sort of reeling after the death of Iwata,
Yeah.
not too long prior to that, right?
Hmm.
So that was a moment of extreme upheaval in the company's history, and they really had to nail that, right? And I think that they understand that they have their brand power is significantly stronger now than it was then, and
Hmm.
they have an ability to command attention in a way that they didn't for sure back in 2017.
Yeah.
So I just think that they don't have the weight of needing to reveal a slate of titles, and they
Yeah,
also
of course.
have
Definitely true.
simply less months in the year to fill for 2025 than they
Yep.
did for
Hmm.
2017.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I think, to your point, the roadmap is important, but I also think keeping excitement up is important too. So having a fun summer show where they say,
Yeah. Absolutely.
here's like Luigi's Mansion 4 from Next Level Games for the
Yeah.
fall or whatever, like being able to do
Mm.
that is
Mm.
is
Yeah.
also important. Um,
Yeah.
but let's talk about the games themselves now, Tucker, because
Yeah.
I think we're on the same page about a couple of them, and then
Mm-hmm.
I think we differ on what that holiday game would be if they show it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's two obvious ones. A game from EPD4, and we can give just a little bit of context as to why we think that's the case. And a game from EPD8, which is the
Mm-hmm.
3D Mario team. Which of those do you want to talk about first?
I think EPD4, because I don't think that's a game they'll open on. I think Mario Kart will be the game that they open on. It's the one that people are,
Yeah,
frankly, most excited for in a general sense, and also it's the game that we know about.
yeah,
I think that, I think honestly, opening, cold opening on a Mario Kart trailer, I think is very possible. I think
yeah,
lift up that energy, show us what Mario Kart is like, tell us a little bit about its features, and then quote unquote dip down to the hardware section to where people are still kind of like buzzing from the excitement of that, and it gives them a little more energy going into that hardware section. And then you can also, of course, be showing Mario Kart footage as you're like experimenting with these sort of things.
right.
And then I think as they close out talking about mouse mode and magnet mode, boom, you go straight into EPD4's game, who are the team that do the experimental casual launch titles, games like 1-2 Switch and Ring Fit Adventure Nintendo Labo, and that are using the Joy-Con in weird ways. And these Joy-Con they're even weirder than the previous ones. So I think that EPD4's launch game,
Yeah.
which they have consistently had for the last like 3 generations, will be one of the first games they show off, as 1-2 Switch was in January 2017.
Yeah, because I think that's just an important detail, right? Nintendo EPD4 is made up of several teams: Nintendo E82, E85, and SDD. And I'm just checking because I don't want to speak out of turn, but they've been at every launch, I think, since the Wii's launch. Because obviously they had Wii
That's what I
Sports.
said, yeah.
They had, I believe they worked on Sing Party also, but they definitely worked on Nintendo Land. The various composite teams that became EPD4. And I believe they also were at 3DS's launch, right? They did Steel Diver. Yes, they did.
I'm
Code
not okay.
co-developed. It was I decided to check that one. Nintendo E85 co-developed it with Vitae.
All
So
right, maybe they're back.
yeah, maybe they are. Maybe we're gonna get into Steel Diver. But the point is, this is just as far as we're both concerned, a real lock for
Yeah,
a launch title. And I'm of the view at this point that it's gonna be a totally new IP.
I agree. Yeah,
I was thinking it could be like another sports title.
yeah,
Because Nintendo Switch Sports ended up being such a massive success in the system that it seemed like a good casual game to have at the launch of Switch 2. But our mutual favorite Nintendo YouTuber, Nintendo Forecast, made a good video about EPD4 the other day, sort of clarifying that within this structure there are separate sub teams, and realistically another one might be more available than the sports team. People should go check out that video. But I think even beyond the sort of pragmatic side of things, realistically, if you look back at through history, right, it has been a new IP from EPD4
Yeah.
on those systems.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I don't really think that they would break from that at this point, particularly because the goal of this EPD4 game, as it has been throughout time, has been to illustrate, as you're saying, MouseCon, or insert any other key
yeah.
new innovation of the hardware in question, right? So
Yeah.
I think that
One,
that
one thing
is,
I
yeah,
one thing I think I will say, just as a, I just came up with this, and this is sort of a soft prediction about
sure,
what that game will be. I agree, new IP. I think a little more character focused,
that'd be very
because I
cool.
think one of the big problems with some of EPD4's games that makes them less appealing to the general audience, of course they're very casually oriented, but less memorable, especially, is that they're often just games with no specific thing going on. It's like Nintendo Labo is, it's really interesting, but you think it's just cardboard, and you're just interacting with miscellaneous worlds and stuff. Or 1-2 Switch especially has that issue.
Yeah,
And actually, I think we've seen them sort of be better at that over the course of the generation.
totally.
Ring Fit Adventure with the fucking Ringy character, I don't remember what his name is, and um, Switch Sports with the Sports Mates, and even frankly, MC Horror Show Pony, and everybody went to Switch. I think them gearing something a little bit more towards iconography, and maybe a colorful world of some
Yeah.
kind, I think would definitely give this a stronger selling value for the beginning. So I don't think this is going to be a quote unquote more generic game like Labo or 1-2 Switch were.
And that's a really interesting point, because if you look back throughout history, we just, by the time you're watching this, we recently put up a video about the history of Tomodachi life.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the Mii's really originated elsewhere. They originated over kind of in Nintendo SPD1, and then found their way into the hardware. So their Wii titles, obviously, what people think about, what associate with them very strongly, those composite teams, Wii Sports, etc. They were working on a general, as you're saying, a general character that was larger than their IP.
Yeah.
Same with Nintendo Land, and yeah, you're right that they tried to particularize more. I actually kind of like those like monochromatic robot characters they have in Game Builder Garage that originated in Labo. I think those are cool, but they're not specific enough. I
No.
agree completely. So it'd be really cool to see them.
They don't have goofy names.
No, and even
Switchy A and Switchy B or whatever.
Yeah, and even MC Horus is just like literally a guy in a horse mask, right?
Yeah.
So I think that as they get closer, and they have sort of, if nothing else, like a nice style to UI across
Yeah.
Labo and Game Builder Garage, I really hope that you're onto something here, and there's a strong
Yeah.
EPD4 specific identity to this game. And
Definitely.
the rumor, the playtest game, Connex, as people are calling it, certainly has some of that, with these little
definitely.
caveman creatures. So hopefully we're sort of at a turning point where EPD4's games are they've always been more than tech demos, but to an extent that's what they make, right? So
Yeah, no,
it would
absolutely.
be cool to see them continue to refine that, almost like Asobi did, into some
Yeah.
kind of identity, but hopefully a
Interesting.
little bit better than
Yeah.
Asobi. Because that's a separate conversation, but I've come around on the Astra's world being too generic thing.
Oh, I see.
see
In
your
terms of
vision
world
there a
building,
little
I
bit
thought you said that we're saying that you've really turned on that game and you don't like it anymore.
No, I still
That
think it's a great
would
game.
have been an astounding.
No.
reveal.
But yeah, so EPD4, I think we're both in agreement, is a 100% lock.
Yeah. And also because it's been a very long time since they
Yeah.
put out a game. The last major release from them was Switch Sports. They were involved in Everybody Went to Switch, but
Yeah.
it's been a long time, and they were for the entire Switch generation on a yearly release cadence, and so I think it's a lock that we see a game from them in 4 days. But I think this playtest game could also come out this year, and I think they'll probably also have one for next year. And so we're gonna get a lot of that creative, hardware-focused Nintendo energy coming out of that team, with hopefully new IP. I mean, a Switch Sports Resort of some kind would be interesting, but for me, on oh shit, something new, something weird level, I'm more excited for whatever new ideas they show to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you broadly. I would love that another Switch sports game, but I prefer that new IP from them. Um, Before we talk about EPD8, 3D
Hmm.
Mario, I'm curious to get your pulse check on Metroid.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you
Uh,
think it's going to show up?
no.
No?
And if it does, I think it's in a more general thing of Switch One games that are going to be great on Switch Two
Yeah,
in some way. And maybe they use it as a Switch Two edition explanation
it's a
sort of
good
thing.
point.
But I think, frankly, the Switch Two edition verbiage that we saw sort of in the fine print on their website a couple days ago, to me, implies some sort of upgrade rather than different SKUs. Sort of internal thing that's just within the hardware rather than buying like a different box or it being a different like actual cross-gen game.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think it's a launch game. I think it's I think it's 6 weeks after launch, 2 months after launch, something like that.
To that end, because then I'll answer and talk about Metroid more specifically, but then are you saying that Mario Kart and EPD4 is the launch pairing?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's yeah, and I think that makes sense.
I agree with you also. It's a very, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I think it's a very Wii U style launch
Yeah,
with the leading games, and I think I think that that's actually good. It's a good idea when the games are right.
yeah,
It's two games that sort of it's one game that's for everybody, but skews more hardcore in Mario Kart, or in that case, 2D Mario, and then one game that's definitely more casual, more hardware focused.
mhm,
Than it was Nintendo Land, and here it would be
yeah.
EPD4. I think it's a sensible
I also
pairing.
think it's possible that we get a Snipperclip style smaller digital game.
Sure.
I hope they reveal that there.
Yeah.
They've been really shaky about their digital games this generation, showing them in actual presentations, and that's really annoying to me.
Yeah.
Kirby Dream Buffet just got dropped randomly online. Good job in Stretchers and Snipper Clips. Like Snipper Clips wasn't even in a showcase, but the other ones were like in like partner showcases or something. I hope that they do more digital only games,
I agree.
smaller digital only games this generation, and I hope that they show them to people because just having Kirby Fighters 2, which isn't a particularly good game, but having that just like dropped one day randomly, it's like, well, Hal made that game. Like show it to the people, get people excited about it. I think it's
Yeah.
something that I hope they change. But that is the most copium I'm going to be huffing today.
I mean,
And it's not a particularly big amount of copium, but like I'm like, God damn it, guys,
it's not even a
show
bad
us your games.
prediction. There's usually some third string game at these releases. It was
Yeah,
Snipper Clips on Switch. It was Sing Party on Wii U. It was Excite Truck on Wii, right?
yeah,
I
hmm
guess it was Face Raiders on 3DS. I don't know.
definitely, yeah,
But
no, that counts.
yeah, so I don't think that's a bad shout at all, and that would be very cool. I
Hmm.
just think that I think that Mario Kart and EPD4 are a great pairing if the goal is to get everybody in the door.
Yeah.
My feeling on Metroid Prime 4 is that the lack of a date there
Hmm.
makes its appearance here more likely, but
Hmm.
I feel better I feel better committing to the idea that it's a fall game, as Metroid games often are, rather
Sure.
than the lack of the date last week meaning it is a launch game for Switch 2,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that there's a certainly more distinct possibility that it is, since it didn't get dated, but I remain skeptical of that fact. And the Switch 2 editions point is something that I don't even really know how to speculate about, because it's
Yeah.
just
It's so vague.
it's so vague. We have evidence, seemingly in Xenoblade, that games might be shipping equipped with on inaccessible modes that are possible in Switch 2. Would that count as an addition? I don't know. The only thing I'll say on that is I certainly hope that it's not a new play control style thing where we're ostensibly filling up the calendar by re-releasing Switch games with largely just control and maybe frame rate related
Mm.
additions.
What
Because
do you mean by control?
like MouseCon or something, like one of the big
Oh,
reasons
I
people
forgot
think
about the
that
mouse. Yeah.
yeah, one of the big reasons people think that Prime 4 would be cross-gen is because of the mouse, or
Yeah.
Super Mario Maker 2 version or something.
Hmm.
Because those wouldn't be deluxes really, and if you look historically, when Nintendo was charging full price for new play control, they weren't actually adding all that much. So
Yeah.
I have my fingers crossed that that is not a key component of this
Yeah.
showcase.
Yeah. I think. God, I think after the amount of Wii U ports, which you and I ultimately agree is a positive thing for the Switch's library,
Yeah.
I don't want to do another generation of games that are filling out the release calendar that I already played. Not because I don't think that that people should play them, but because people already can play them on their Nintendo Switch too. So you don't need to re-release it, you fucking Nintendo, if you do that,
Yeah,
hypothetically.
that's why the new Play Control is a good analog, because those games were playable on Wii natively through back compat. But there was at least a difference there where you needed a controller that didn't come in their system and a memory card that didn't come in their system.
Course, yeah.
So even there's a little bit more of a leg to stand on, and there was a
And
obvious...
the games did need to be fundamentally reworked to work on a Wii Remote Nunchuck.
And there was a massive disparity in sales between the systems, obviously. So there's a rationale there that wouldn't exist here. But I digress.
Did any of those new Play Control versions sell particularly well?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. I don't think they did. People don't really talk about them. They also chose like a weird slate of games to do it with anyway.
Yeah, they did, like Mario Power Tennis and shit. I mean, the Pikmin... Well, there's a lot of ones people love, like the Pikmin 1 and 2 versions are played better than GameCube, or obviously they were only released in Japan, but Prime 1 and Prime 2 are new Play Control games, and then that formed the basis for a trilogy. Yeah. Because there's cool stuff, but let's talk about 3D Mario, Tucker. What are you feeling about 3D Mario?
I think that's what they're hanging they had on for this year. Yeah. I think it's going to be the impressive adventure game that they really sell the console with, in terms of something that's single player. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think that it's insane that they've been cooking for so long. I also tend to think that means there's also a smaller game from that team, maybe a year from now or something like that. But to me, that makes much more sense as the holiday game. And whether that means Prime is like July or September or something like that, I think both of those slots kind of make sense to me. But this is what you want. This in Pokemon, those are your two of your highest selling games of the generation already. So I think positioning the system alongside a major hitter like that, because Zelda's not ready, we're not going to get Smash, not a new generation of Pokemon, and I don't think that Animal Crossing is that quick. I don't think we're going to see it this soon. So 3D Mario is the one that fits all the bills.
So Prime 2 released in November, Prime 3 in the States released in August. So I think you can triangulate. Also, you throw Dread in there in October, right? Yeah. You could put it out in September or something, right?
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've been waffling on 3D Mario, and for the love of the craft, I'm going to say that it's not the holiday game.
Sure.
Just to have a little fun here.
Yeah, why not?
And let me lay out my case for why. I want to read a quick excerpt from our group chat here with Bo, because he makes a good point.
Did you ask permission?
No, but this is a good point.
So it's okay if you leak it, because it's a good point.
Yeah, because it's something that he's had me thinking.
I always feel that about email and text leaks as well, personally.
It's been on my second monitor. I've been thinking about it now for the duration of the discussion. He's talking about Tomodachi Life, and he's asking where Animal Crossing fits into this picture. Mm-hmm. And then they're going back and forth about, could it be a holiday game this year? I think the answer is yes.
Animal Crossing is the holiday game?
That's my view.
Sure, yeah.
The reason I say that is not only is it actually a really, really salient point to have some time between that and Tomodachi Life, but I think you also need a massive Mario game for early next year around the movie. Now, I understand that... You don't think so?
No, because if Mario Kart 9 and 3D Mario are already on the shelves, people are just going to buy those. Yeah, but and they will already have bought those, and so
I just think realistically, have the
systems at that point.
Why do you need 3D Mario and Mario Kart in the same year? Because they would still be out if
they did that in 2011 and 2017.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just think that put the game out in March. You need a big game for the first quarter of next year. That's not that. That'd be what, 9 months after release of the system. What do you say?
Animal Crossing?
No, I don't think so. I think Animal Crossing is a good holiday game. Animal Crossing has been a holiday game in the past, and I think it's going to pull in a key audience. I mean, the best counterpoint to Animal Crossing being a launch game is the idea that Switch Lite likely did a lot of good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
New Horizons
Hmm.
beyond the pandemic's obvious
Definitely.
impact on that game. But I just think that you can push 3D Mario out a little further. I think that a big Animal Crossing game brings in a distinct audience
Sure.
that 3D Mario doesn't necessarily. I mean, 3D Mario
Hmm.
is wonderful, and we'd both be over the moon for it. And
Yeah, yeah.
if it's this holiday, I'd be super happy with that. But I don't know if you need that shot in the arm. I mean, think about the 2011 example. Nintendo needed a massive, massive push, and those games released very close
Yeah.
to each other.
Hmm.
After a very bad launch, after a summer on 3DS that was like Star Fox and Ocarina of Time, which was cool, but that's not really,
Yeah.
they needed that big shot in the arm there. They're coming off Mario Kart being their biggest, not game, one of their biggest games ever, right? So
Yeah.
I think if you get that out and you say, we're gonna put Mario out a little closer to the movie, have a big pop there, and get in that Animal Crossing audience early that's been so hungry.
Yeah. Well,
It,
here's the thing
yeah,
that I will be curious to see over the course of this generation as Nintendo starts a new generation alongside a more solid multimedia presence.
yeah,
Is if direct correlation in terms of, let's just say, quarter of a
yeah,
multimedia project and the release of a game, if that's something that they gear towards. Of course, that was not the case
right.
with the release of the first movie, and Wonder kind of being the analog game came out,
6 months later.
8 months later. Yeah, 6 8 months later. Um, and we haven't seen from any company doing a multimedia push a direct quarter release of a game alongside a multimedia project. Fallout obviously has nothing. Until Dawn was 6 7 months before that movie hasn't even come out yet. Um, uh, Nothing for Borderlands. I think what a lot of these companies see it as, and I think rightfully so, is a way to pace out marketing beats, not to have them synergize and pump each other up in the exact same time, but to have it be you release the game. A
Yeah,
little bit later, you've released the movie. People are excited about the movie because it's the new big thing for that IP. They're going back and buying the game, and then you can release another game on the other side of that newly expanded fan base because of the film, to where then another game gets a big bump just after the release. And so I don't think it makes sense to release a game of the same IP at the same time or in the same quarter as the movie releases. So I think you
yeah.
do 3D Mario in October, movie in April, holiday 2D Mario or Mario Maker or something like
I mean,
that.
I think that there's a big counterpoint though to what you're saying. It's from Nintendo themselves, since Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. I mean,
Yeah, but a theme park's very different. I mean, that's a fractional size of uh, marketing beat for them, and
I
also
don't think so.
access to the audience. What?
You think about you could.
The
I'm
Mario
thinking
movie made like $1.5 billion in
theme parks
like
make a lot of
literally.
money. Theme
No, I
parks,
know, but yeah, because the tickets cost a lot more. I would say 20% of the amount of people are going to go to the Donkey Kong Park as saw the Mario movie.
sure, but that's not exactly my point. I think you're underplaying the importance of a theme park in terms of money in, money out, and general brand importance.
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country Returns launched. It opened. The theme park opened in Japan
Yeah.
within about a month of the game's release.
Hmm.
It was December and then January. And the key art for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is identical to the art used in the
Yeah.
theme park.
Hmm.
And that game is, as it has become the joke in the community for months now, has received a level of
Yeah.
attention and
Yeah.
marketing support that you know no other game has gotten
Yeah.
in recent memory. Donkey Kong, the theme park, also got a direct, the same way the movies have gotten a direct.
True.
I
Yeah.
think you can't underplay the significance of of the theme park, and we also can't underplay the obvious identical theming and matching between Donkey Kong's game and
Sure.
his park.
Yeah.
So we have, I think, in my
But I
view,
don't think that would be the case with Mario, though. And I think that that's another key difference. I remember being quite bullish in 2023 on the
sure,
2D game being a direct mirror of the iconography and style of the movie. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Mario is something that's so flexible that I don't think that direct synergy in terms of visual style is almost even possible. I don't think you would care to have it because the character and his world and visual style are so
Yeah.
flexible.
I mean, that's not even necessarily my broad point, though. My broad point is that we have a key example in Donkey Kong to where they did care deeply about multimedia synergy. That's just my larger point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, with a relatively minor theme park expansion with like one ride and a crappy re-release of a game. I just don't think that probably their biggest movie they've ever worked on and might ever work on for a while, and one of their highest selling games. I don't think it makes sense to have those at the same time.
Okay, I think we'll just agree to disagree on the importance of the theme park. I just think that there's
Yeah,
a way that you can look at what Nintendo's done recently and say that they are perhaps interested in a greater amount of synergy. How about between what they're
sure,
doing outside of
but
games?
I
And
still
games?
think it is synergy, right? It is, but with like 5 months in between.
Sure, I'm just arguing that they're gonna not do that. My argument is that they love
Yeah,
having a big game in that Q2 window. They have a big movie
yeah,
there, and to me, you can read it very clearly that you might as well have that big game tie-in. So I can see a 3D Mario launching early next year, maybe in that spot that has been taken up, yes, by Animal Crossing in the past, but also by Breath of the Wild or by
yeah,
insert any other big Q2 game they've released
yeah, yeah.
in the Switch era. I just think that Animal Crossing is such a potent IP for them that has
Yeah.
been dormant for so long at this point that the latent excitement that can be generated by having one this year, I think, could be quite
Yeah.
huge.
Sure.
EPD5 is a team that works on Animal Crossing and Splatoon. In
Hmm.
between those two, I think it is, in fact, Animal Crossing's turn before it is
I
Splatoon's
agree.
turn.
Yeah, I
And,
agree.
and so I think that if you're looking at the Switch 2 as needing to transition as many audiences over to it as quickly as you can, there is a large swath of players who love 3D Mario who are already buying the system for Mario Kart or
Hmm.
just the next era of Nintendo. There's a
Yeah,
lot of people that buy Nintendo systems just to play Animal Crossing. And
yeah,
so I think captivating them early is not a bad idea. And while Animal Crossing has often been like a second or third year of a system's life game, it
yeah,
has
yeah.
also been a first. You have to go back to the GameCube, and I think there's one other example I'll look for in a second. So the precedent is not massive, but I think that the conspicuous absence of EPD5, particularly the Animal Crossing side of that team, makes me feel like they got to have a game
Yeah.
ready.
Well, I don't think it's particularly conspicuous. I mean, we're at 5 years between games. That would be a shorter turnaround between New Leaf and New Horizons. So I don't think it's particularly conspicuous, and I think next year would also like 6 years is a totally normal, and
Yeah.
add a little bit on top because it's going to be probably a more complicated game and a more visually impressive game, and so a shorter turnaround for that I think is less like that makes much less sense in my mind.
Yeah, but you also got to think about when Animal Crossing became a bigger deal with New Leaf. There
Yeah.
was a lot of Animal Crossing content prior to New
Oh, of
Horizons.
course. No, definitely true.
Because
Yeah.
you had Happy Home Designer, you
Hmm.
had Amiibo Festival, and then you also
Yeah.
had Pocket Camp. And
Yeah.
obviously
And
we
the amiibo cards
and the Amiibo
that
cards.
they
You had all
fucking
of
sold
these.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, you had all
And
these
the
things.
amiibo like Lottie
Yeah,
that
the
was
line
everywhere.
and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And all of that led up into New Horizons. And then post New Horizons, you've had really just Happy Home Paradise, a DLC expansion.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
And they
there,
shut down
right.
Pod Camp.
There
Yeah.
was DLC for New Horizons, obviously, but it was not even as substantive as what we got for New Leaf
No,
in
of course.
the campers and everything, which actually prompted a re-release of New Leaf
Mm.
on cart version with all that stuff. So Nintendo took Animal Crossing when it sold a quite significant amount, relatively speaking, on 3DS, and
Yeah,
was
of course.
continuing to push the IP more and more and more. And then the game becomes 6 times as large, and then they're far quieter with it than they were in the previous period. So
Yeah.
I just that's why I say conspicuous.
Sure. No,
So
that's fair enough. Yeah.
I think that and again, to be clear, I also have a bias. I would rather be playing an Animal Crossing game. As much as I would love 3D
Yeah.
Mario,
Yeah.
I'd rather be playing Animal Crossing this holiday. And I think it just adds, in terms of the audience, a more diverse type of buyer to the Switch 2 pot sooner.
Sure. Yeah, and then I'm curious for you in terms of okay. So number one, I thought you were saying that there wasn't going to be a holiday game in this, but if there is one, you think it's Animal Crossing? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
If
okay.
they do that
And
one
so,
last thing tease, sure,
yeah,
they have Animal Crossing there.
okay, okay. And then I'm curious for you if you think there will be, and if so, what be a Switch 2 exclusive single player game that is
Yeah.
one of the major releases of this year. Because I think not having that would be not a good idea, and I think they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean yeah. I mean, this is broader predictions for the year then, but I think Luigi's Mansion 4 for this year is a pretty good
Sure.
shout.
Hmm.
Game was Luigi's Mansion 3 was massive on 3D on not 3DS on Switch.
Yeah.
Next Level Games obviously didn't end up making Princess Peach Showtime as many of us thought. So
Yeah.
they've been cooking since Battle League, which was not a
Hmm.
particularly robust game, right? So
Hmm.
I think their next big title, that makes a lot of sense.
I agree. Yeah, that's a good poll.
And maybe that yeah, go ahead.
Another thing that I think is possible for this is for me is what is most possible for a tease that's maybe even farther out, maybe
Sure.
2026 game. I think is Monolith Soft. I think that
Yeah.
they are Nintendo's team, especially because EPE3, the Zelda team, is not going to be putting out a game for a while. That their games showcase Nintendo's hardware better than anything. And so I
Totally.
think that's even if it's some sort of 30-second tease, no name 2026, just an idea of on a visual and spectacle level what Nintendo's new hardware can do as on top as improving upon what the Switch could do. I think that Monolith Soft's next game, because they also have they opened a second studio, the second team. Or expanded. I think that is a tease for that for 2026 is very, very possible, and I think that
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing you would want to have in the first look at the system is some sort of game that is incredibly, incredibly impressive, and that's really the only team that they have that really does that. At least that's available right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand why through that lens people say Metroid Prime 4 is that. And it
Yeah.
could be that, but again, I just don't think that you demonstrate the power of the system in the same way. I think your point
No,
about Monolith
no,
Soft is
definitely.
very
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
If Retro Studios was making an original Metroid game for this year,
Mm-hmm.
or for this system, rather, I think it would be more impressive than what Monolith Soft could do. I think they're the only team that could do something more
Sure.
impressive than Monolith.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
But they're not, you know, okay, a prettier version of a game that they've spec'd out for Switch One
Mm-hmm.
doesn't quite hit the same way as a big new IP that Monolith's
Yeah.
been putting together. So I think that's a good shout, and it just makes me wonder to what the resource cost of Xenoblade X was.
Oh yeah. We don't. Yeah, we have no idea. I mean, clearly that's definitely the Xenoblade Definitive Edition team.
Yeah.
And they made Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. And so, the cycle's a little bit weird. Again, this new team kind of adds a wrinkle into it that we haven't really experienced
Yeah.
before. But they turned around Xenoblade 2 years after Xenoblade X.
Right.
So, and Xenoblade 3 was already 3 years ago at this point. And so it'd be 4 if the new game came out in 2026.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, you also just raised an interesting point for me. This notion of what would be the big single player game for the year. It just had me thinking about like what's the best selling software generally speaking, across Nintendo systems, and what's the division between single player and multiplayer.
Mhm.
If you look at the top 10 for Switch, starting at the bottom, you have New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, which is
Both.
yeah, it's both. You have Mario Party, which is obviously multiplayer. Tears of the
Yeah.
Kingdom single player. Pokemon both. Odyssey single player. Breath of the Wild single player. But then the top
No,
three.
Odyssey's both.
What?
Cappy.
That's a great point. Top three in Smash Bros. Ultimate, New Horizons, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are all multiplayer and / or single player. Especially Animal Crossing has I think a distinctly strong single player component.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess I just didn't put much thought really into the division between single player and multiplayer. And what I'm
Yeah.
curious about is to what if Nintendo does, because
I mean, they've never gone a launch window without a marquee single player game.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That has been these. I mean, other than Wii Sports, it's interesting. I wonder what Nintendo thought was going to be the big system seller between Wii Sports and Twilight Princess. That obviously doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But 2D Mario, 3D Mario, and Zelda have is across the whole course of Nintendo's history been the game that you launch the system with, and that's the one you buy them for. I think now seeing, especially with the Switch, how accessible multiplayer
Yeah.
was, them leaning more into online, I think I think you're right, have a bigger emphasis on multiplayer games right now than they maybe ever have been. But I think that, and frankly, this is also just me projecting, but as a hardcore Nintendo fan as I am, I would be really disappointed if there was not a single player major game that I'm really going to connect to in that launch window. I mean, okay, maybe it comes out, a month after. I'm still a little bit iffy.
Well, yeah.
I got to deal with Mario Kart for a month, but I do think there's a big subset of Nintendo's audience that the games they take not necessarily on a sales level, but on like a passion level. I think it is Nintendo's single player games that really gravitate towards the hardcore audience. It is Breath of the Wild and Odyssey that people really remember from the Switch. And so I think it would be a missed opportunity and a disappointment to a big subset of the fan base if you don't have a single player game in the launch window.
Well, that raises an interesting question then. If we're both on the same page, it's Mario Kart and EPD4, what would that single player game in the launch window be? Which is not even a gotcha. I just say it's an open question.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it would be through that lens.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm trying to think of what other EPD team could have a game like that ready, you know?
Yeah.
Which
Sure.
maybe if you're raising this point of precedent that they want a single player title in that launch window, maybe it is indeed Metroid.
Yeah.
Because ultimately Zelda is not ready. I'm also not a believer in this theory that they're going to tease a 3D Zelda game for years down the pipe just because they've done it in the past. I don't think that they're going to do that again.
No, but I think they are going to have a Zelda game, and it's going to be a Warriors game. And that's going to launch in the miscellaneous holiday window. And that's going to be something that Switch 2 hardware, very impressive.
That's a good point.
That Nintendo Warriors team hasn't put out a game for 3 years at this point, which is about their release cadence. So that's going to be there. Do you see that as a single player game, multiplayer game? Like, how big is that in terms of like
Warriors?
when it grabs an audience? Yeah, I mean, aren't those games co-op?
Yeah, I think most people would consider that a single player game.
Okay, yeah.
Or at least I guess the framework we're thinking about is a game that is there's a satisfying single player only experience. Because
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, well, here's the other thing, Tucker. What if it is indeed Mario Kart? What if indeed this idea of the adventure
That's very
mode,
possible.
very
possible.
is the single player component that we're overlooking, right?
And I would be like, yeah, okay, you did it.
Yeah.
That was the missing keystone.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's a really interesting point. This notion of what's the single player focused experience, and it'll be interesting to see if they even really feel like that's an important distinction to make.
Sure.
Ultimately, I think it's gonna be a really curious show. Let's end it on this. What's the volume of announcements of new games shown?
5.
You say 5?
I say 5.
I'm gonna say 3.
Okay, so that for you in your mind, not counting Mario Kart,
No, that would not count Mario Kart.
not counting Mario Kart. Okay, so then I guess 4.
Because
no, and I'll add an extra on top. I think it's 5.
Yeah.
I think it's 5.
Because the way I view it, I think you're right about opening on Mario Kart. You got Mario Kart as an opener. You've got a big thing as a closer. If it's a holiday, you're probably right that it's a holiday thing, right? So either in your view it's Mario, in my view it's Animal Crossing, and then EPD4 is situated in the middle, and then there's one other thing in there too.
Okay, so yeah, and then that's the 3 in your eyes.
Yeah.
Okay.
3
for
plus
me,
Mario Kart.
Of course, yeah. Open on Mario Kart, EPD4. I think Warriors, Monolith Soft Tees, close on 3D Mario. I think that is
that's interesting. That'd be really interesting.
And I think that is a very satisfying breadth of games. You get representative of their different styles of games, their RPGs. You get for the Monolith Soft Tees, you get something for 2026. You get a holiday game. I think, and maybe I'm too balance-pilled, where I really think that Nintendo does their best work, especially in Directs, when they do, as I mentioned earlier, represent each of their verticals of types of games, and also each of their how far away the games are.
Yeah.
Launch titles, launch window, holiday, and a 2026 sort of farther away game. And I think that Nintendo wants to put their best foot forward. I think that showing that roadmap and also showing off games that appeal to a variety of different types of gamers. They were actually very good with that in the 2017 presentation when they did Xenoblade 2 and Fire Emblem Warriors and SMT5 and like and of course the one final thing that we didn't really talk about is how big of a presence third-party games will have, which I assume in your mind would have to be pretty big if they're only going to do 3 new game reveals.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think that the I think that people are misconstruing the Insider Gamer report about who has dev kits. There's no doubt that the marquee AAA teams do.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot of those games. I think that those are important to conveying the power of Switch 2, which is a message they have to hit. It's not.
So which major publishers do you think will be represented?
I think Ubisoft, I think EA, I think Activision, and I think Square Enix.
Yeah, and I would also throw Capcom on that pile.
Yeah, Capcom.
But
CD Projekt maybe.
Yeah, that'd be very. And then Bandai, with FromSoft.
Realistically, I think all of these partners are on the table. Yeah,
of course. So do I. Yeah.
We know that there's this deal for Call of Duty, right, on Switch. Are they going to try?
I think Phil Spencer will be in the Direct.
There could be Microsoft games. There could be. Yeah, I think we can't underestimate that as a pillar. And again, it's not like Nintendo to be power focused, but there is a necessity, I think, in illustrating that this is a more powerful system, particularly through the lens of this being a system that we know a lot of third parties are extremely excited about. And they're going to be bringing over games that I don't think are going to be broadly new, but widely impossible to play on Switch 1. So I think we're going to see a lot of ports, and I think that's going to be a pivotal part of the show.
Third parties, absolutely. So, and I also think there's a chance that we see some sort of exclusive third-party presence.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these teams might be very excited with new Nintendo, more powerful Nintendo hardware to make games that go alongside Nintendo's and are potentially even exclusive. Well, maybe exclusive window like Monster Hunter Rise or Octopath was on this new system. I think that a exclusive Square Enix game, an exclusive Ubisoft game are actually both possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good precedent for that in a game like Zombie U or Red Steel. If you go back in time, Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter 4, 3D, various things. It's very extensive.
Mario and
Rabbids, and yeah, there's a lot of examples in that opening frame of something from someone, right? Which is very vague, but I think it's a good point. Even if you're looking at the 2017 presentation, you had Suda there talking about No More Heroes, right? So. Yeah, I wonder who it would be. I mean, there's been really long rumors of a Resident Evil exclusive to Switch, which never materialized.
That'd be crazy.
It would also fill the sort of conspicuous lack of a Resident Evil title so far for this year.
Oh, interesting. Good point. Yeah.
So,
because 9 is definitely next year with the movie next year.
You're being goofy.
What? No, wait, hold on. What's goofy about this?
Oh, I thought you were making fun of me for trying to say that the game will line up with the movie. Is there a Resident Evil movie next year?
Yeah, Zach Cregger's Resident Evil movie potentially starring Mikey Madison.
Oh, really? I didn't even know about that.
Produced by Sony Pictures. They announced this like 5 months ago.
Oh, cool.
But if I was to make fun of you, I would say they launched on like the same day or whatever. I'd be like, nah. But sure. I think it'll be like Resident Evil 9 is, first part of the year and the movie's second part of the year.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the presentation?
Bugger off!